All right, so we're going to jump right in. I think one of the first places I like to start is just kind of recapping some of the things that we heard. And during the meetings, I think the overall direction was pretty clear from a DDA and a Main Street organization. There's definitely a focus on building out the amenities that help the residents that live here have a more well-rounded life. You know, it's one of those things where it's like, we don't want to have to leave as much. We'd like to have more business that we can support here. And then there's also this secondary goal of utilizing outdoor recreation to help drive and grow our economy. But again, it's one of those things where it's like, we don't want to give away our stuff if we're not making money off of it. It's okay to be selfish, right? I had an interesting conversation today with some members of the College of Knowledge over at McDonald's, and you know, they informed me about the role of hunting in the community. And I said, you know, I learned something a long time ago. You don't market hunting because the hunters that live in your community are already armed. And that is not the kind of message that you want to take out there. So being able to realize that when we talk about outdoor recreation, that sounds like a really common sense direction, but if we're not prepared to receive the economic impact, we're giving our stuff away for free. Does that make sense? So you've got this fantastic trail that runs right alongside this depot. How do people find their way to your businesses? How do people find a way to spend time and spend money here as part of that resource? Those will be some of the things that we really want to dig into. What you're going to see tonight is by no means a complete reinvention. I am a big believer that a community of less than 2,000 people needs to be extremely smart with their resources. You do not have money to waste, and you certainly don't have money to burn. How do we take advantage of decisions that have already been made, resources that have already been invested, while still improving and stitching together the things that we're trying to do as a community? So I always like to first analyze the current image, the way that the community communicates itself. In doing this, I do a good bit of research. I stumbled upon a really cool historic postcard yesterday. Has anybody seen this? Really, really great old postcard, just a line from Evart, where life is worth living. The nice thing is you have a historical precedent of leaning towards trees and water to represent you. You know, the trees and water are your origin story. They're the reason you're here. This is what brought people here, and it's what fueled the original economy. So that's a very common sense thing to do, but we want to make sure we tell that whole story. If we step out a little farther, we've got a couple different things going on here. We've got the DDA that's really led this kind of visual story of the I Heart Everett. We've got the city logo with the trees and the water. We've got the police patch, which I'm going to come back to in a minute. And then we've got the high school, which has decided to use any Wildcat graphic they can find. Which again, this is very, very typical of our high schools, but you know, that it's one of those things where it's like, we're not exactly sure what color blue we are, so any blue will do, and we know we're a wildcat, so if it's a cat and it looks mean, we're good. So there might be some ways that we can kind of pull that together a little. And then to dig in a little bit deeper, just in doing research, finding multiple variations, even with the city logo, I'm guessing, based off what I'm seeing, that this has kind of been a slow evolution where it probably started with the one inside the square badge kind of thing, and then started to lose some of that over time. So it went from the badge with just blue and green to the blue and green, and then with a website redesign and some other stuff, we got the yellow added in. Again, not good or bad, just good to know what's happening there. So from that, we start to dig into the brand elements. I know a lot of you are like, okay, just show the new logo. Well, that's not how it works. It's all about the components. It's the slow build, right? It's the anticipation. So with this, we really focus in on 4 primary components that build out your branding toolbox. And those 4 components are your colors, your typeface, your graphics, and your message. Okay? So I'm going to go through this one by one. I'm going to show you what I landed on, and I'm going to explain to you why I made the decisions that I did. So let's start with colors, okay? So what are the high school colors? Blue and gold. What colors has the city been using? Green. And blue. What colors is Depot? Red and? Gray. What colors has DDA been using? Red. So you can see that consistency, right? Or lack thereof. So what do we do there? How can we stitch those together? Well, what we did was we took all of those elements, we analyzed what the colors folks were using, and then we were able to adopt and recommend tones of each of those that actually go together. It's okay that the blue is darker than the high school blue. It's okay that the yellow in the system is not exactly the gold of the school. Now, there's a quick caveat. Don't judge too much off of color on the projected screen. Let me see if I can hold this up without breaking everything. You can see the colors on this screen are dramatically different. They're prettier on this screen than they are up there. So don't freak out too much. It's a very, very logical color collection. You've got the outdoors, so obviously blues and greens make sense. You've got the high school with a lot of pride, so obviously blue and gold makes sense. This building is a really great way to kind of bring in some of those warm grays and reds that kind of symbolize that there's a place here. And now all of a sudden, your colors, every single color that you have has justification behind it. So somebody can say, well, I don't like that color, but it came from something, you know? So it's like, well, what's the alternative? I don't care that you don't like it. What's your strategic alternative to replace the recommendation of the strategic system? Does that make sense? Does that burn anybody up? That's kind of hard to lose by hitting every color, you know? But to be able to be that broad with only 6 colors is a really, really good way to handle it. So then from there, we start to look at our typeface. Now, most communities see this as a challenge. They open up their computer, they see 140 fonts, and they attempt to use every single one of them in a poster, right? And I am here to tell you that is not actually a challenge that wins you points. Typically, what I like to do is I like to recommend no more than 4 typefaces in the system. Here, I'm only recommending 3. The 2 are used hands down the most often, and then there's one that I call an accent typeface. So I'm going to show you what these look like. The top, the primary typeface. This is a typeface that was literally decided upon off of the way that Evart looks in it. I wanted to put the way that we present your name first and foremost. And you've got some interesting dynamics that I'll dig into in a second, but that your identity is the thing that really drove that decision. It's all caps. It's called a serif typeface, and I went to school for design and learned that a serif, the technical term is a doohickey. It's one of those little things that comes off the letter. This secondary typeface is called a sans serif, without serif. It's designed, it doesn't have little doohickeys on the ends of the letters. The sans serif is content neutral. It's not, it doesn't carry a tremendous amount of character with it. And you do that on purpose. It allows you to be contemporary when you need to be contemporary and allows you to be traditional when you need to be traditional. And then this accent typeface. This is a handwritten typeface, very hard to read, and that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means you can't use it all the time, and you certainly can't use it where you need legibility to be the top priority. Sometimes using something that's difficult to read makes someone stop, pause, and dig into what you're trying to say. So it is a strategic decision, but I just want to say out loud, I know that it's hard to read, and that was a strategic decision. It's just like in downtown, sometimes we put parallel parking spaces, not because they're convenient or because anyone likes them, but we make them hard to park in so that you go and park in the parking garage. So it's just one of those dynamics of being very strategic in the decision. So now from here, what we're going to introduce is something that you have never really had as a community, and it's called a word type. So this is how your name presents in that typeface. But what I did is I actually went in and I customized the letters. So if you notice, the E and the V fit together perfectly at the top. I elongated the bottom leg of the E. I customized the way that they were related and the spacing to one another. And I even changed the angle of the V slightly. So when the V and A sit next to each other, the space between them is perfectly even all along. So that now becomes yours. Nobody else in the entire world will be able to simply grab the typeface and type the name and replicate it. So you now have something that, from an identity standpoint, you can use across the board. Every time you're talking about your place, you've got that uniform word type. Now, just to kind of compare, this is what the new word type looks like in comparison to the type in the old city logo. Which one's stronger? It's got more weight to it. It's got more letter in the same space. And you're able, look at how weird, now that you see it like this, look at how weird that space feels between the A and the R. And you didn't even know that you were design nerds, right? But it's like, now you're starting to see that, okay, that makes sense. That's a tool, and this is just showing what it looks like with them overlapped. Like you can see how much more content there is in the same space. So then from there, we talk about graphics. And I really believe that you all deserve some sort of award for this guy right here. The police badge has figured out a way to fit more items into a small space than just about anyone that I've ever seen. Okay, so obviously, let's digest this for just a second. We've got a wildcat in the O. We know we've got the trees. We know we've got the logs. So we know what that is. Top right, we know it's a snowmobile. Below that, that's definitely a farmer milking a cow. Next to that is definitely the largest industrial factory I've ever seen in my life. I have no clue what that is. That's not a deer. That's definitely like a sweet potato. If it's a deer, it's already been hit by the snowmobile. And maybe that's why they're headed together like that. But then, like, what makes it really great is the thing that's holding them all is very definitely the logo from New Mexico. So I don't know where that connection comes from, but I make fun that this is completely fine for what it is. You know, this is a police patch. It's a very, very different tool. If we think about the city logo, if we think about the way that you all have told your story for so long, it's always been based off trees and water. There are a couple things that to be able to tell the full story, I think would be nice to be able to incorporate in time. A couple of those is, I'd love to be able to figure out some ways we can bring the depot in. The fact that you got these trails running through, a stylistic trail can be a path, it can be a road, it can be just the kind of symbology of moving. And then also the fact that in between this water and these trees, there is a historic downtown. You know, so those are some of the factors that I wanted to try to address. And then from there, we start to talk about message. And the message is the thing that stitches everything together. So what I like to do for this is I like to write what's called a brand statement. And it's just a very short narrative that kind of regurgitates the things that I heard you say yesterday and leads us into a direction, a simple basket that allows us to hold all these ideas and tell these stories. Does that make sense? All right, so I'm gonna do my best to read this for you now. It's dark and I'm dyslexic and I probably spelled something wrong. Is anybody in the room a current or former English teacher? Oh, okay. I'm asking for grace. I'm going to do my best. Here we go. Born on the banks of the mighty Muskegon in the land of green gold, a special place has been bringing people together for nearly 150 years. That place is Evart, and we are proud to call it home. Surrounded by the richest of Michigan's north, we are proud to be the hometown of the great outdoors. With trails to ride, rivers to float, and backwoods to explore, Evart is an exciting town that has preserved its small town charm while providing the perfect blend of natural solitude and community connection. From our farmers market and downtown concerts alongside our restored depot, to the sound of the dulcimers at the fairgrounds, to the deafening roar of the Wildcats on Friday nights, Evart knows what it means to be home. We invite you to be our guest. Know it's close enough to visit, and it's far enough to truly escape. Explore our hometown, Evart, and learn what we mean by historic effort at home by nature. So what that does is that gives you that opportunity to kind of see. That's a living document. You can take that, you can edit it, you can add to it, you can subtract from it, you can pull out little bits of it, but it just starts to get those wheels rolling of reminding people why the place they call home is so very special. Because at the end of the day, community pride is the most important place to start. You don't need to tell any visitor a message if they're not going to have that repeated upon arrival. So you've got to remind your friends and neighbors why their home is so special. So that leads us into this tool that we call the destination brand. So what you can see here is in the most complex version, we've created a newly styled version of trees, a newly styled version of the river, but now in between it, we have some very, very subtle gestures. I drew from scratch your depot. Now, I will say if you look at it, the one thing I didn't draw in the depot is I didn't draw the little, how it juts out right here on the side, just because it was starting to get busy. It was a decision on purpose. To the side of that, you actually have what almost appears to be ghost out, a version of your downtown skyline. I made a point on that corner building to draw specifically your museum front facade so that you could see that continuity of it truly being yours. To the left of that depot, that very subtle design gesture to the trail that runs right alongside here. And then you can see a couple different variations. The logo itself, the words are stacked in a modular format. It allows you to be really, really adaptive in the way that you say things. So the first and foremost, we wanted to put historic across the top. We wanted to tell the message to everyone who might think they've been to Evart. If they haven't come all the way into town, if they haven't seen your historic core, they haven't seen everything that you have to offer. And then, of course, you have your word type, and then below that, you have a place for different modifiers. You see the tagline in that difficult-to-read typeface, again, wanting to pull people in and take time with that simple message. You also see different variations. Obviously, there's one that says Michigan, but we've got one that says on the Muskegon. You have simplified down versions as it starts to get small, because the more you shrink it, the less you can have in it. You don't want to shrink all that busyness down. It gets really bad when it gets small. So having that opportunity to have those different variations built in, creating an option that goes horizontal. because you can't always fit a tall one everywhere you want to put it. And then making sure that it works in one color, making sure it works in that simplest possible form. Then from there, you then have a basis to be able to create additional stuff like merchandise logos, things that can go on shirts. Most of the time in a community, the only shirts or apparel that people have are either high school stuff or something that's so ugly you would only paint the house in it. So being able to create these designed variations, can you imagine what that would look like on the front of a t-shirt? You know, doing cool things that tie in, allowing your business community to profit off of the connection between the people and the place. Now, from there though, that's the destination. Everything you see is shared by the community, owned by no one. Businesses can use it, event organizers can use it, and organizations can use it. But then we have to understand that we've got these groups in the community that still need to be able to communicate about what it is they're doing. So obviously, because we're Michigan Main Street, we're going to start with the DDA. And, you know, I wanted to pay tribute to the idea that this logo represents. Main Street truly is a grassroots economic development engine. It is an opportunity for passionate people to create progress in their community in the most apolitical way possible. So we wanted to play off of this idea of an organization with heart, while also knowing that the Main Street model not only is it a statewide organization, it's a national organization with thousands of communities and a time-tested 40-year-old four-point approach to revitalization and economy building. So what I did was I created a system that looks kind of like this. So again, you're taking that heart, turning it into a simple four-sided icon. You can see this kind of tagline for the organization at the intersection of pride and progress. So being able to take that advantage of the personal connection somebody has with the place and then tying it in. Again, we've got stacked versions, we've got horizontal versions, we've got super tall versions. This little thing right here is super important. Just says funded by DDA. Who wants to volunteer for a DDA? That's like saying, I'd like to be the tour guide at the waste facility. Like, it doesn't sound fun or exciting. It's not the terminology that motivates people to be excited. It doesn't matter how charming Brian is. You know, it's just not the thing that people relate to. So being able to know how to position that and then reframing the name of this organization to be Main Street Evart. You're connected to Michigan Main Street, and you're connected with all these peer communities throughout the state. Again, showing how that simplifies down, still works in one color, showing how the simple icon comes to represent through these four colors, the four-point approach of Main Street. So you can see how that all kind of fits together. Then we jump over to the city. And again, we're trying to keep these things really close, but just enough variation that you can understand who's who and when. So with this, we simply created a very, very simple stylized version. We are doing some trees coming up out of the V, playing around with that a little bit. Now I'm gonna be blunt. Is it okay if I'm blunt? Okay, I'm gonna be blunt. This is hard in this community. It's hard to talk about economic development in this community. It's hard to talk about outdoor recreation in this community. It's hard to talk about airports in this community because you can't use words like grow, can't use words like high. You know, there's a lot of politics there. So I'm gonna be honest, like, as I'm sitting there designing stuff, I'm having to make sure that every time I design something, it looks like trees, right? Because it's gotta look like trees. So I need to say that because I need you to know there is a tremendous amount of thought into the design. Everything is very, very deliberate, because if you're not deliberate, you allow the sarcastic side of your community to pull the rug out from every progressive step forward. So nice, clean, simple, but it sets this standard. You could see where this could then make its way over into a refreshed logo for the airport and having that kind of stylized E in the slipstream of the plane. The Chamber of Commerce has gotten some fresh energy. It's got some vibrancy, and they deserve to have kind of a refresh there as well. So we talked yesterday about how that's all about helping one another, this kind of idea of the handshake, the business helping business, this network that is creating. So again, using the typefaces, using the colors, but departing from the trees and water and making it more focused on that personal connection that they're trying to promote. Perfect opportunity to rethink the brand around your industrial park. Right now it's called the Air Industrial Park. The air component of the industrial park didn't seem to really play out as the competitive sales advantage. There doesn't seem to be any industry that has been overwhelmingly drawn by the fact that there is an airfield, or any industry that directly fuels the air industry. So you might just rethink the way you package that up, and I'm calling it the Evart Innovation Park. So innovative ideas, innovative ways to think about it, stylized E, moving forward, gives you a nice little refresh to be able to market those properties. Now, this next slide is the scariest in the whole show because it has to do with the high school. And I'm not suggesting that you change. I'm just suggesting that you think about adopting something new. Because we redid this. We kind of redid my high school mascot at home is the Buccaneer. And the mascot they had for the past 30 years was not at all a Buccaneer. It was a very angry, hand-sketched, homeless person, you know? But what was really cool was we designed a new logo. The new logo was professional. It didn't replace the old logo. It was adopted in addition to, but it has driven a whole new line of new merchandise. So new people with new apparel, and it's really kind of created a whole new wave of community pride. So this just kind of shows where adopting a more professional and kind of standardized look on that graphic could be something. And if you know anything about hockey, hockey always has a primary logo and a shoulder logo, a secondary logo. So it might just be that what you do is you keep that 3/4 angle Wildcat as your primary logo, and then you got the straight head on as your secondary logo. So now from here, we start to look at brand extension. Brand extension is where the components that we've seen, all the tool elements, start to make their way into events and additional initiatives that are going on in the community. So the first thing that we heard about yesterday was the fact that the DDA purchased a downtown building and wants to do a pop-up program. And the pop-up program it almost sounds like part pop-up, part incubator in the same space. But pop-ups are a really interesting thing because if you don't communicate to the community what's going on, the community simply sees businesses that keep opening and closing. So instead of it being seen as a business opportunity, it's seen as repetitious failure. So you have to own that narrative. I wanted to come up with a name for that program and that facility. And what I actually did was this was the place where I decided to really dig in to the logging heritage. And I actually spent some time looking up logging terms. And I found a kind of interesting term called a springboard. And a springboard is a board that would be driven into the trunk of the tree and allow the cutter to elevate themselves to get a better swing on the tree. So you think about the term springboard, bouncing from one place to another place, hopefully a better place. It's exactly what we want to do with an incubator style program. And the idea of getting a better vantage point, positioning yourself to be more successful at your task. So just got a simple logo that kind of ties into that, always changing by design. Always changing by design. That's a very, very deliberate statement so that people understand that when a pop-up shuts down, that's not a failure, it's exactly how it was intended. Farmers market, got great stuff going on there. So again, just being able to show how you can do simple things to tie that into the system. Business cards, I wanted to take a look at that. This shows how a quick redesign. Now, I will say on both Mark and Sarah, they're probably going to need business cards that accordion fold for all of the positions. Mark's got, it's like, okay, boo, 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 boo. But what you can see is you can see a similarity in design, but a distinct difference between Brian's and city staff. This allows you to kind of centralize and kind of have a single person who is helping to make this happen. A continuity while still preserving the individuality. One of the things that was interesting, and again, I hope nobody takes this as criticism, it's just observation, but I picked up Mark's and Sarah's business card. At first glance, they look exactly alike, except they're not. And they both have a bar running down the left-hand side, but the logo is a different size. It's in a slightly different place. So it's all that tells me is right now, we're having to operate as design as you go and recreate the wheel. And it's like, we need this business card. We need you to make it look like that business card. And that's not the most efficient way, but that's the way that communities typically work because they don't have that toolkit in place. From here, there was a lot of talk yesterday about the Main Street journey map. The journey map is a way to map out the business startup process in the community. Now, this is a really, really great tool. It's intended to be a very succinct tool. Right now, the organization has yet to go through the process of identifying the journey map and what those steps are. So after reviewing the one that the state kind of shared, I was like, I don't really want to design that yet for them. I've made the offer to Brian that I'm more than happy to design that in the brand standards once the map is created. But I wanted to show you all the same theory of how that works as it might relate to something that did already exist. And I found the development guide. So you download this from the website. This is the cover. It's stunning, right? I mean, this gets me excited about the investment that I'm getting ready to make. So a quick redesign of what that could look like. Very simple incorporation of the word streamlined. Even if it's not streamlined, you got to have a goal, right? You got to fake it till you make it. You got to say we intend to be streamlined. And then this is one of the inside pages. This is the special land use process. Okay? So this is what it looks like now, and this is kind of the redesign. Pointing out those steps, highlighting the step by step, and then showing what a process timeline actually looks like in a graphic way. So people can look at this very, very quickly, and they can understand. We know that working through processes of getting things approved aren't ever as fast as the development community wants it to. But if you don't set the proper expectation from the first point of contact, then you're going to let them down every single interaction you have. But if you set that and you make sure that it can be understood, you have the potential to oversell those expectations and potentially deliver on a more expeditious timeline. Does that make sense to everybody? Does after look better than before? Okay. This next one's a fun slide. It's probably the most expensive slide in the whole show. Comprehensive wayfinding signage. Now, the community has got some fantastic gateways. So please hear me loud and clear. There is nothing about this slide that infers that any of those gateways need to be replaced. You might find that there are entry sequences into the community that aren't yet signed that might need a gateway. You don't have to have as grand a gesture as you have at the gateways now. You can have something that's a little bit more subtle, and that's what we see on the right-hand side. Then the two signs in the middle are called trailblazer signs. Trailblazer signs have 3 destinations on them. They help to create that seamless experience through the community. These are all designed to fit into both MDOT and federal guidelines for sign design. On that big sign that you see, those letters are mandated to be 6 inches tall. And on the smaller one, they're mandated to be 4 inches tall. So these are big signs. And they're big signs because the federal government makes them big. But what these do is these help to pick up that communication from your welcome and carry them all the way through to the destination. Next to that, you see what's called a pole-mounted gateway. You can announce arrival to your place multiple times. You typically announce at corporate limits, and then you might announce again immediately upon your 100% intersection. Take advantage of every single time things feel different so that you're reinforcing that orientation. Next to that, you have a map kiosk that can be oriented with trails and getting around downtown, even pole-mounted parking signage, street banners, all these things kind of fit into that system. Taking advantage of vacancy and reframing the way that you have vacant spaces so that it's not always just for sale for rent, but helping people be creative and be excited about that being seen as an opportunity. Wayfinding signage, as I said, can be very expensive, so we recommend rolling out what we call guerrilla wayfinding. Low-cost, plastic, perforated signs that are not intended to be DOT standard. They're all in a communicative style, and they're all focused on walk time and bike time. You know, so it's all about getting people to explore deeper into the community. We heard a lot yesterday about the facade program. So branding that facade program and then being able to make sure that when investment is going on, that you're getting ownership off of that investment and people are getting excited about it. So you see fresh face, strong heart, tying back into the whole identity around the DDA and Main Street organization, and then a sign that kind of helps to play off of that, what's going on during construction. And then we would be remiss if we didn't also give you the tools and the roadmap for how to make this a reality. So the first thing that we're going to give you all is a comprehensive style guide. The style guide is going to define all the type. It's going to define all the colors. It's going to tell you how to use it and how not to use it. It's also going to sign over all copyright to the community. So this is now yours, free and open to use as you see fit. Next, we have created a comprehensive implementation checklist. We phased them in 3 phases based off what we know to be the easiest versus the hardest for communities to be able to implement. There is no proper order. People act like this is a step-by-step process. It's really not. But now on one page, you can see all the things you need to be thinking about. You can prioritize, and you can start to check those off. Then from there, we've also created a how to be a brand partner page. This is intended for additional organizations in the community, as well as event organizers. And all it is an entire page of creative ideas that you could take advantage of this system for. So you can dig into those. And then finally, we've even created a score sheet that will allow Brian to revisit the system every 12 months or so, identify what you've implemented, score what you've done, and use the score values to identify the low-hanging fruit for what you should do next. Make sense? All right, 45 minutes on the dot. Nailed it. Now it's your turn. I'd love to hear your thoughts. First reaction, I mean, obviously, this is not, so you're not ever going to hit it perfect after, 24 hours worth of work, but what do you think? Is this workable? Does this make sense? Do you see some things there that resonate and feel like they might work? Thank you. Yes?
When the
We are going to make all the resources available by Friday. Yep. I know you're not used to stuff working that quick, are you? Yeah, no, we actually, as I was developing everything, I started to prepare, make sure that I had all my color definitions. Everything's already defined as the PMSs in the files. Already moved over all my fonts, so you've got open types of all the fonts in the folder. So I get on a plane tonight at 10:40 down in Detroit. While I'm on the plane, I'm going to work on the style guide. So my goal is I'd love to be able to get the link over tomorrow, but definitely by Friday. We believe that the best thing you can do with something like this is get the tools in the hands of the community and then tweak it and adapt it as you use it. You can sit there and you can argue for months over the nuances that don't make any real difference in being able to start connecting the dots. Or you can get in, get your hands wrapped around it, figure out what might be missing, and then go from there. So Brian knows how to get with me, and we've kind of got an open offer there where we continue to provide support back to you all for a while, just making sure that you have what you need. And hopefully the goal would be there would be some new things come out of this. I didn't go through and design events for every logo for every event, because I don't know that every event is going to exist forever. And there might be some new strategic events that come up in the near future that you all will need help creating something that fits into that system. So, yes?
So you had one picture up there of a potential, let's say, t-shirt or silk screen. Well, if you get a chance in all your spare time in your plane rides, more of that kind of stuff
Absolutely.
together?
Absolutely. One of the things that I typically do, and I just didn't have time today, was I'll do some different types of merchandise. I always like to show an example of what a hat would look like, because I love hats. One of the big ideas that is important to hear as well, especially in a community that has identified outdoor recreation as a focus of economic development, there's an idea what we call brand co-oping. Now, typically when you make a branded product, the way that people start is they open up a catalog, they try to find the cheapest shirt, and then that's where they start. Because there's this automatic assumption that people aren't going to pay a premium to have a product connected to a place that they like. But when you're trying to really connect with outdoor recreation, you can see some true benefit by taking your brand and applying it to well-known brands that are already industry leaders in that field. We developed a brand for a 19-county region in Virginia. And in that, one of the first things that they did was they made a series of Patagonia vests. These vests were expensive. They were well over $100 a piece. They didn't make a ton of them. But you can imagine when the leader of this initiative walked in with a Patagonia vest on and Southwest Virginia on the other side, you automatically start to think that there's a quality there. So I will be glad to add some additional collateral materials.
Also silk screen and embroidery.
Absolutely, absolutely. Whenever I do the simplified versions, I always try to think about embroidery. That primary logo with the depot in the downtown, you don't ever want to embroider that. There are embroiderers out there that would welcome the challenge because they like to see how many stitch count they can get in a small spot. But you're exactly right. We always think about making sure that it simplifies, it scales, and it can work in both screen and in embroidery. Any other questions?
I think you hit it, right? I mean,
Awesome.
you took everything I've given you and you added.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, yes, ma'am.
Just a technical question. So you said the serif is altered for Evart slightly, and if you're using the sans serif for all of the other, unless it's that writing.
Pretty much. You'll see, like with Chamber, the Chamber was in the same typeface as Evart because I wanted We're kind of weird about the way that we design chambers of commerce logos sometimes. We decide that the most important thing in the logo is Evart, but everybody calls the organization the chamber. So I always like to make sure that that is the most dominant thing you see when you see that chamber logo. So you will have all the fonts to be able to use. You will have that primary to be able to use when it feels right. But you will also, when trying to go through and replicate, I am going to include in the system a file that is simply called word type. And it will be the name Evart all by itself with nothing else. And you can take that and you can incorporate that into anything that you do. It'll come in a variety of different colors and it'll come saved as 5 different file formats. So that's where you can go from to make sure that you always have access to that word type when you need to incorporate it. Any other questions? Yes?
This isn't really a question, but when you were talking this morning with the board, the committees, we talked about the trees and the water. Did anyone say anything about the farmer's market and where all that food comes from? I mean, this is also a farming community.
Right.
Not just fishing. Not just fishing and boating down the river.
Right, right. We did talk about it. I think.
This isn't a negative either.
No.
I'm just bringing it up.
And I'll be honest. There's a really simple way to incorporate agriculture, and then there's the really stereotypical way. You know, with the way that I've designed the logo now, it would be remarkably easy to the left of the pathway to include 2 more stripes that replicate the 3 stripes of the river at the bottom that would then go green instead of gray and would be representative of crop rows, would be representative of that kind of symbol, the basic level symbol of agriculture. And it wouldn't change or alter it in a negative way, but it's just one of those very subtle gestures that incorporates agriculture into it. If you think that would be appropriate, I'm very comfortable with a stylized edit like that. I think that I always kind of felt like the path was hanging out there on its own a little anyway. So I think that that recommendation might help to make that feel more natural as well. That's a great point. And to be honest, I mean, I'm aware of the existence of agriculture in the region. I think that, unfortunately, just in the way that some of the conversation was processed in my own head, I was just thinking a different angle of it. And so hearing you say it, that's a great point, and I think it's something I can easily roll in.
You do have it on the police.
Yeah, it's definitely on the police. I'm going to find the deer that looks like the sweet potato. Okay, yes, sir.
Early in the presentation, you showed a postcard that said "Where Life's Worth Living."
Yep.
Can you incorporate that into some of the wearables?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, honest, I love the old pennant. I mean, any of that kind of stuff. And I think that's one of the things I always think back to my high school time. I was involved in the yearbook. And our journalism teacher used to always say, you have to know the rules before you break the rules. And I think a lot of times people are convinced that the idea of branding is having one and only one image and being forced to repeat that one image over and over again. But in fact, it's about understanding the stage and being able to cultivate ways that you can connect with the people you're trying to communicate to. I love that idea. I don't think that it would necessarily, let's say that I did a trifold brochure that was kind of a walking tour. I might incorporate that pennant as kind of a historic component of that. Or I could absolutely see somebody doing a sweatshirt with that on there, and people would probably buy it up. So yeah, that's a great point. Things like that, they're yours. They're your history, and you are always allowed to take advantage of that and use that. Great question. Really great question. Any other comments?
This is awesome.
Thank you.
Good. It is just, I'm floored. I wasn't expecting all this.
Well, I'm glad. As we kind of move to wrap it up, because I did say I wanted to try to keep it an hour for you all. Unfortunately, there isn't anybody here today with us from Michigan Main Street. But Michigan Main Street is the reason that I'm here. They're the ones that have funded this visit completely for you all because you are a Michigan Main Street community. And Lee was with us yesterday. She worked with the board on some strategic planning for the next year. And I just continue to be impressed with both the support that Michigan Main Street provides to their communities, as well as their goal to help streamline that process and give as many tools and resources as possible. So as you move forward, please remember that this really was a gift to the community to try to help move you all forward. You all can choose to focus on the things that you disagree with, or you can choose to focus on the values that you share as a community. And when you've got 1,900 people, I can tell you this loud and clear. You all are going to be better served if you focus on the things that you share. Because there are too many other places that are competing against you. The enemy is not here, the enemy is away, and being able to take that passion that you all share for the place that you call home and turn that into a passion-driven momentum is the goal for our community. So thank you all so much for caring enough to be here. I've recorded the show. Brian will have the link to that tomorrow, and that will be free to share. Anybody who wants to see it is more than welcome to watch it. I always kind of slightly tongue-in-cheek say that, you all spend an hour out of your day sitting here having to listen to me drone on about all this stuff. Therefore, that means your opinions matter more than people that haven't taken the time to understand the underlying strategy and all these recommendations. So moving forward, people love to be snarky. As some of this stuff starts to roll out, if you come across somebody who decides that it's their day to be Debbie Downer, then send them to the link. Say, hey, invest your hour, and then come back and complain and see what they say after that. So thank you all so much. I hope you can see through everything that I created. I really, really like your home. You live in a great place. It is both beautiful, but just the energy of the people that I've met it is one of those places where it does not take long for you to feel at home here. And that is an attribute that you should be proud of, because that does not exist everywhere. So thank you all so much, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. I'm going to come back and visit in the spring, and then I look forward to see what you all do with it. So thank you again. Have a great night.